Well, hello, everybody. David Bianco here at the Safe and Sound Texas Audio Excursion, and we have a very special guest this evening. Jerome, would you pronounce your last name so I always get it right?
Sure, Sabbagh.
Sabbagh.
Yep, you
And
got it.
great. So, Jerome is here to talk about a few things his musical journey and career, and the thing that kind of connected me to him through a mutual acquaintance, and that is the fact that he's starting a record label that focuses on analog being the source of the material and the way that it's recorded, which of course is a big piece of what we talk about on the channel. So, Jerome, thank you very much for joining me.
David, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So I was telling Jerome, this is my inaugural first video from my new house. So congratulations on joining me for that one.
Well, congratulations to you on the new house.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's been a whirlwind of activity, as you can imagine. Everybody's gone through it. So
Yep.
so great to have a live show as a kickoff, which I really enjoy doing for people on the channel and the people later who come back and watch these things as well. So Jerome, based on what I've read about you, limited information that I've read, why don't you give me a little, and our audience, a little background on your musical, where you started, what you're into musically, and how it led you on this journey to eventually create this label, and why you chose to do it the way you're doing.
Sure. I grew up in Paris, France. I've lived in New York since 1995. Played a saxophone. I'm primarily a jazz player, although I listen to a lot of different music. I enjoy a lot of different music, but I mostly put out jazz records because that's what I do, and that's what I've been doing for a long time. I started recording to analog tape really about in 2004 was my first record under my name,
Mm,
which was called North. And that was kind of happenstance. What happened is I hired engineer James Farber, who's one of the great jazz engineers of this time. He's also recorded a lot of different things like pop and rock and different things, but he's a great jazz engineer. So I knew I really liked the sound of the records that he recorded. So I sought him out and hired him for my first record. And he suggested two things that proved to be seminal for me. One was recording all in a room, live to two track, meaning the mix is done directly. And the second one was recording to analog tape. So even though that record and most of the records that I've done after that didn't end up being released on vinyl, because at the time it was CD only, that was before I got it together with the vinyl, those were still recorded to analog tape. And every time I compared, because we always had a digital backup, so we would do a digital live to two and then a live to two to tape, and then that would get digitized later, but we still could compare the two sets of file. And just using the tape sounded better every time. So that's a blueprint that I used on several records. And about 10 years ago, I got to work with one of the great mastering engineers, Doug Sachs, who was a champion of all things analog. And he was a great mastering engineer in every format.
right.
But what happened is he mastered my record called The Turn. Uh, and then he really liked it and liked the sound of it. And he actually suggested that I release it on vinyl, and was like, you heard digital files, they're really good, but I could really cut this to vinyl and that would be better. So I launched a Kickstarter campaign, and this was 10 years ago in 2014. And I was like, okay, this record is already out. It exists in digital. It wouldn't be analog all the way because the tape was digitized at some point, but I've got Doug Sachs who's telling me this would still sound really great on vinyl and it's going to sound better than the files. Is anybody interested in helping me finance this? And lo and behold, I got enough on Kickstarter to get this project done. And then the record got some attention in vinyl circles and audiophile circles. Michael Fremer reviewed it. Other stereophile reviewed it, and so I got a bunch. I mean, what was for me at least a bunch of orders. I was able to repress, and then that got me thinking that I maybe had enough of a customer base to do the next one completely analog and make sure it stayed, recorded the tape and pressed to vinyl, cut to vinyl from the tape. And that's the blueprint I've been using since. So I've now done 2 records, one called No Filter, the other one called Vintage, which came out last year. And those are all analog records. And the next one, which is coming out on the label I'm creating, is called Hard, and that's coming out August 30th. And that's also a James Farber recording. So same engineer 20 years later, live to 2 at Power Station in New York, and live to tape. And the success of the records that I've made basically enabled me to try to start a label and see if I could develop this, not only for myself, but also eventually to produce other people's music, and also not only in the realm of jazz, but also hopefully expand to different genres.
Great. So that's an interesting journey. I mean, when you say Doug Sachs, immediately my ears perk up, as a lot of us do in the vinyl community. Rest in peace, Doug. But his equipment was bought by Chad Kassem,
Yep.
Analog Productions, who I visited last year, and saw his cutting equipment and his studio gear there. So Doug set a standard, and the work that he did over all those years, you really hit a very sweet spot in the vinyl analog community by getting with him. So boy, that's really fortuitous for you to have that situation happen.
I was really lucky because I sought him out because I loved his work. So I really actually sought him out, but I wasn't sure. I mean, honestly, back then I wasn't sure I could afford him. I wasn't sure he would want to work with me.
Sure.
So and he ended up being very nice. And he also did a fantastic job on the record. This is a record that didn't need much, but he made it better, and he was able to make it a little better and a little clearer, a little tighter in the bass. And he was able to do that without taking away any of what was good about it. And in my opinion, that's actually a very hard thing to do, to know what to do, like as little or as much as needed, but not more. And
Gotcha.
he was really great like that. He nailed it the first time. Like when the files came back, I was like, okay, this is significantly better than what I had, and I was already pretty happy with what I had, but this was better. So he had great ears and great taste, and he was certainly a great person to work with. So yeah, I'm lucky that the first vinyl I ever did was cut by him.
Yeah, not many people can say that.
Yep.
So that's really excellent. So basically, I guess I would say through your experience and your auditory feedback that was given through the experience of being in the CD world initially, and then having original analog tapes to compare to, it started to become clear that this was an area where you could take some advantage. And ironically, of course, the vinyl world started coming back, of course,
Yep.
which really, it really went on overdrive, of course, during COVID. So what got you then to the actual place of creating then a record label? That's a bigger leap than wanting to do vinyl.
Well, for the last few years, I've had a licensing deal with Sunnyside Records, and basically what I used to do with them was I licensed the digital to them, but I kept the rights to everything analog. So vinyl and also reel-to-reel analog tape, because I've also been putting those out, and that's going to be part of what we're going to do. Is we're actually going to offer reel-to-reel tapes made directly from the master. So because I was already handling everything related to the vinyl, I basically learned how to do it. I worked with Bernie Grunman, another great engineer. So
Oh
he's
yeah.
been doing the cutting for No Filter, Vintage, and Heart, which is the one that's coming out. And I worked with a couple of different pressing plants, one of them being QRP, Quality Records Pressing, which is Chad's pressing plant. And the other one, which has Got a Groove in Cleveland. And both these plants are excellent in my opinion. So I basically learned how to put it all together, how to budget it, how to, and I got enough people buying it that it seems like it's not a total suicide move to try to do this. So I'm going to give it a shot, and I'm going to hope that people are into it enough and supportive enough that we can make this work. And so far, the support is been great, and I'm really grateful to all the people who tune in and support this, because it's hard to pull off on a technical level, on a financial level, on an artistic level. Those records, in a way, you have to get them right from the get-go. When you record the tape, and especially Live to 2, you're playing live in the studio. You don't get a chance to fix everything after the fact like you would in Pro Tools, with everybody being in booth, and you could redo your sax solo 10 times if you wanted to.
Sure.
So I don't believe in any of that. Like, I believe in musicians playing together in a room, whether it's jazz or classical or even pop music. If you're gonna like lay down tracks or blues or whatever it is, I think you get more immediacy, and you translate the music to recording better if you agree to play everybody together and then try to capture that as best you can. And the process of recording all in the room and the process of recording the tape, that's all part of that.
Right. Yeah, very much the authenticity and genuineness of that is really critical. And I think I don't know, I think it affects kind of the soul of the music in a way as well.
Definitely. I mean,
Things
it's a
get,
big difference.
yeah, things get literally a little too binary in those tools. Now you can do some amazing things, of course, but the genuineness of it to be like in a live setting is really the key here. So you've already got a sale here. I see WCB
Oh, well, thank you to
Jazz Vinyl.
WCB Jazz Vinyl.
Yeah,
Appreciate that.
yeah. So thank you, WCB. Thank you for that. Yeah, go to the site there, and of course you can order the product directly from him. They even have test pressing. I think you can order.
Yep.
I think I've ordered one of those myself. Just because I would like to be on the ground floor of something so unique. I think that's important.
Oh, thank you,
but
David.
Yeah, you're welcome. But you mentioned reel to reel, so I think that's. I know Chad has started to
Yep.
offer a few of his in there as well.
Yep.
How did your relationship with Chad get started? Through Bernie, or
Sorry, say that again.
how did your relationship with Chad get started?
No, just through Quality Records Pressing, actually, because
Okay.
I hired them to press The Turn, which was my first vinyl.
Okay.
And so they pressed that, and then they pressed No Filter, and I've also produced a couple of records for other people that they pressed. So also at some point, Chad started being interested in distributing my stuff. So Acoustic Sounds, which he also runs, bought some. And so we had we started to get acquainted, and actually met him at Expona in Chicago a couple of months ago, and we were on a tape panel together, and so we had spoken on the phone before that, but I got to meet him in person. So that's how the relationship started. But yeah, he's been a pioneer in this industry, and it's inspiring everything he's been able to pull off, both with the vinyl on the production side and also the reel-to-reel and all that.
Right, exactly. So yeah, that's an amazing tangent there that you've taken to get into that, and that's it's becoming, for the true purist. I mean, what's better than that? Now here's some artists that you were with in the
Yep.
recording of Heart, I assume.
Yep, this is Joe Martin on bass, and this is the legendary Al Foster, who's one of the great drummers. He's 80 years old now. He's played with everyone from Miles Davis to Sonny Rollins to Joe Henderson to Stan Getz. So he's played with a lot of big names in jazz, and he really is my favorite living jazz drummer. And this particular project is really kind of special to me because it's been 12 years in the making. Like 12 years ago, a mutual friend basically arranged for me to sit in on Al's gig at a club in New York called Smoke. And since then, I did that a few times. I got to meet Al and play with him. And about 2 years ago, I finally was able to get him on a gig, and that went really well. And he agreed to record with me. But this is really very much a dream come true in terms of being able to play with him. So I see you going through the website. Like,
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
if you go down on that picture of the tape machine, one thing that's interesting about this is an Ampex 351, which is one of the great late 50s, early 60s tube tape machine. What's special about that one is it was completely redone. It runs half-inch tape. Most of them run quarter-inch tape. This one runs half-inch tape. And it also runs 15 IPS and 30 IPS. And that's also really rare because those weren't really made to run that. So it took us 2 years to convert it to that with some of the best technicians in America. And that's what we used to record Heart. So Heart was tracked directly to that machine, and we actually brought it to the studio at Power Station in New York. And then, because I had leftover tape from my previous session, we were able to track the record to this machine, the Studer A820, which is a solid state 80s machine that they have at Power Station, and to digital. And I ended up having 3 versions. And so I could compare not only digital to analog, but also analog at the same speed, same tape format on 2 different tape recorders.
Wow.
And to me, this one won, and actually won handily. Like, it sounded, I mean, for my taste, it sounded more like us playing in the room. It was more accurate, more vibrant, more lifelike. And so that I was happy because I was hoping that after all the work we put into it, it would hold its own, and it really did. So we're going to use this for subsequent records. The previous record I did, Vintage, was mixed to this machine, and Heart was recorded live to this machine, and that's going to be part of what we use going forward.
Wow, that's an amazing story about that piece of equipment. Really, and there's a lot of information on your site, which I found really great to read the background details about some of the equipment that you had. So I encourage you all to go to that site if you're geeking out a bit like I do when it comes.
Like we all do.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. We all do. And, it just really, it kind of represents to me, where you're at, as far as the details, right? Getting into where you've come from and what you're doing and how you're putting it together and sharing it with everybody. So I really think it's a great place to go to look at that. Again, this is the site, analogtonefactory.com. Great.
Yeah, so there is detail on there, like the consoles. That's what we're working on now. The green one, which is pictured, that's an Altec 250 SU, which is one of the greatest tube consoles ever made. And the other one is an Altec 230B. That's also a great console, and that's actually the same model of console that the great jazz engineer Rudy Van Gelder used in his studio from 1953 to 1957. So we're redoing these consoles, which means we're changing the resistors, the capacitors. We're going in to make sure they function as they should. And in some cases, we're making sure that they can interact with modern equipment as best as possible. But we've been doing some tests with these consoles, and we also have a few mics now that are really great, mostly old ones, but some new ones, and just basic recording, like in my partner Pete Rendy's house through these consoles. So far, that's really promising. So the idea is a few months from now, when the work is done, being able to take these consoles to a great sounding space and use them in conjunction with the Ampex 351 tape machine to make the best, sounding records we know how to make.
Yeah, down to talking about tape stock. That's you're getting right down to the the magnetic media.
It makes a difference. Like the
Oh yeah,
three kind of pro tape stock that you can get, they all sound different, and it's not insignificant. So we tried all three, and then there's one that we like the ATR one on our machine better. But it is really a difference. Like everything makes a difference. Every piece of equipment you use, every different tape stock. The machines, of course, have to be really good, and then the most important thing is the music. So if you play all in the room, like the band gets a chance to balance each other. Like you play with dynamics, you hear each other naturally, and that's a really big deal. And then if you have a great engineer to capture it, and James Farber is certainly one of the best for my taste, then you have a chance at hopefully making a great record.
sure. Well, yeah, balancing the right equipment together, the tape. I mean, that is a bit of an art to get the things to match more to what really sounds the most natural for
Hmm.
what you're playing, for the room you're in, for all
Yep,
sorts of variables that go on. So, yeah,
absolutely.
you're right about that. It's a very it's I always make the analogy to cooking, with the chef. You have a lot of ingredients, but different ingredients affect the outcome differently of the taste of what you end up receiving and getting.
Absolutely. And also, the chef analogy is a good one in the sense that usually the better the ingredients, the better the dish in the end. To
Right.
me, like going through these consoles, that tape machine, using tape, having the vinyl be directly cut from the analog tape where it stays analog the whole way, you're giving yourself a chance to at least preserve as much of the sound quality, the vibe, uh, and the overall music. You're giving yourself the best chance to preserve as much of that as possible, so that hopefully somebody who's listening to the record or the tape, or even in digital, but the tape and the record are going to sound much better. Hopefully the music is going to hit them, and it's going to be something that they're going to be into, and it's going to be something that they can really appreciate.
Right. Exactly. Here's a question from a buddy of ours, KRWD.
Yep.
Wanted to ask, what brand of tape do you use? I think you mentioned just a second ago. Is it ATR,
Yeah,
ASR?
so Heart was recorded live to half-inch ATR master tape. The other brand is RTM, which stands for Recording the Masters. And they make two tapes right now, SM900 and SM911. And I've used SM900 in the past. My record, No Filter, was tracked to SM900, but it was also tracked on an ATR 102, so different tape machine. And Vintage was recorded multi-track to SM900, so on 2-inch multi-track tape, and then mixed on the Ampex I mentioned earlier to ATR master tape. And right now, we think that everything that is going through the Ampex, we're probably going to keep using ATR master tape because that sounds better to our ears.
Right. So, yep. He recognizes who they are. That's
Yep.
good.
Yep. I mean, they are the two big, basically professional quality tape makers. Now, there's also an Australian tape and there's a Chinese tape, but I don't actually think they make them in half-inch. So you could have that in quarter-inch, but I don't think you can have it in half-inch.
Mm.
I'm reading a question. Are there any issues with supplies of tape? Well, to be honest, yes. Not so much getting it, but we've had bad batches. We've had issues, and both companies have been good with solving those issues. But it's a little risky and it's a drag. Like basically, you got to make sure you
Mm.
get the tape in advance and try to make sure it's cool and make sure it's not going to mess up your session. But we've had issues with both, and we've been able to work with both companies and get good results in the end. So it's not a deal breaker, but you got to be careful.
Yeah, and it really screws your timing up if you're waiting on it and it comes and you're in a last minute. I mean, that's
Yep.
part of the, getting session time and getting the people and
Yeah,
yeah,
part of the issue is like back in the day, everybody recorded the tape. So the quality control, I think, was high because the numbers were very high. It's like the same with pressing vinyl. Like you hear about bad pressings and like pressing plants like turning vinyl very quickly, and you get warped vinyl and off center vinyl and all sorts of issues. It's a similar issue, I think. Like back when vinyl was like the primary mode of distribution of music, you had massive plants that were running 24 hours a day. You had huge companies that invested a lot of research and development. So all that stuff was a lot less niche than it is. And because there was big money and that was the record industry as a whole, I think at least there was like a certain technical know-how and a certain technical standard that I think is harder to recreate in a niche market such as the one we're in now. But I think people are really trying, and there are pressing plants that are capable of great work and do great work. And same with the tape manufacturers. I think they're really trying to put out the best product they can.
sure. You had mentioned earlier about the various formats and all, and it made me think about the fact that when it comes to vinyl, and this has really become much more readily understood today and than it was 10 years ago, let's say, is this mastering engineer and the effect that they have on the outcome of what you get, how they cut it. There's a lot of issues and variables with, semblance and all sorts of issues that can come up. How long the recording is on one
Hmm.
side. There's all sorts of 2 by 45 RPM now to stretch out the groove some to give you
Yep.
less. So I mean, it's a really high level art. And you talk about these top mastering engineers, Doug and Bernie and Kevin Gray, Ryan K. Smith. I mean,
Hmm.
all these people that we're getting to kind of know, that is so different to me than I think that always was overlooked. Just like, oh yeah, they put it to vinyl.
Yeah, it's. I mean, those guys are all, some of the best. Like they're very high level. It's a real art. Definitely the longer the side, the softer they have to cut it. So you don't want sides that are super long. And then the equipment they go through and how they're gonna cut a record, like the choices that they make, those choices are all crucial. And like even with somebody as good as Bernie Grunman, like one thing that I found recently is like I always ask him to give me one tune as a test track, like with EQ, which is equalization, so you can affect the frequency response of the highs and the lows at different frequencies, and flat. So I can see what the tape we recorded. First, I need to hear what it sounds like on his machine with his electronics, because even though you calibrate the tape and you have test tones, it's going to sound a little different when it goes through his machine and his gear. So I ask him flat, and I ask him to take his best shot at EQ, and he's really great at that. And so is Doug Sachs. And on the last two records, actually the last all the records I've made to vinyl except the turn. So on No Filter, Hard, and Vintage, there is actually no EQ. We went with the flat version. And one thing you can do over there is he has a way to bypass the mastering board and come out directly of the tape machine to the cutter head. And so
Mm,
that's what he did for my records. And when you do that, because there's one less step, you don't have to go through the mastering board.
sure.
It actually sounds better, and it's not an insignificant difference. It's actually kind of a big difference. So in a way, if you don't need EQ, you're better off going straight and
Hmm.
bypassing the mastering board entirely, and that sounds even better. Now, if you need EQ, and he's one of the best guys at it for sure, then by all means do the EQ if that's going to make for the better record. But yeah, everything makes a difference, and I know this is a primarily like analog thing, but like in digital too, like every converter you use, every signal pass, signal flow, all that stuff, it all makes a difference.
Yeah.
And so that's why you got to be really careful with everything you do. I noticed a question that we didn't answer earlier. On the
What was
listener
that?
end, you record a quarter inch. Most decks are quarter inch. Yes. So the end product for the reel-to-reel tapes that we sell, they are quarter inch. I've had a customer or two request half inch, and I've made it happen for them. But the regular format is quarter inch, 15 IPS, CCIR or IEC, which is the same thing. And that's the regular formats of our tape. So it looks like this. So this is actually vintage on tape. It fits on two tapes. So this is side B or reel 2, and this is side A, reel 1. So the whole record fits on two tapes, and yeah, it's quarter inch, and that's the pretty much the standard that most people would expect, and that's what we do.
Hmm, great. Yeah, I mean, anytime anything passes through something else, you enter in potential variability.
Absolutely.
Um, and
Absolutely.
that's the thing where if you could go direct, like you said with Bernie, if the content is strong enough and it sounds good enough, you that's ideal. I think
You definitely gain something. So if you have a good reason to do EQ, then it's totally fine. I'm not like against it on principle. Like if your record is going to be better for it, absolutely, absolutely you should do it. But if you have something that at the recording stage, like you said, is good enough or you like it or you connect to it, then preserving it is actually hard. And the more direct the signal path, the more of a chance you have at preserving it.
hmm Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then it comes down to just the cutting head and making it happen at that point, and the equipment on that end.
Yeah, and then it comes down to test pressings and the
Sure.
pressing plant. Like they're gonna plate the lacquer that they get. That's a
Right.
really important step.
Absolutely.
And then you get test pressings, and you really got to do quality, pretty heavy quality control on those test pressings because even in the best plants, and I consider myself fortunate to be working with the plants that I've been working with. I think they're great. I think they're great plants, but still, you still got to do quality control, and you still got to catch any consistent noise that you get on test pressing, because if it's consistent, it means it's on the metal plate and
Yeah,
it's going to be on every single copy.
that's right.
So you want to avoid that as much as you can. So, I get test pressings. I sit down with a stopwatch and I write down every little tick and pop or swoosh or any background noise that I hear. And then I cross reference it with two other test pressings. And if anything is on three test pressings, then I write back to the plant and I'm like, guys, track 1, 2 minutes, 11 seconds in left channel, there's something, and then they track them down. And a lot of times they're able to remove them or at least lessen them on the metal part. And that's how you get to at least the best product you're going to get.
hmm Yeah, that's the detail work it really takes because it's a highly physical process, humans involved, and
Yep. Yep.
um, not a clean room environment per se in most places. I mean, and so it's it's definitely something. It's never going to get better than that test pressing. If the plate has it on it, it's going to carry the weight the whole way through. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm just reading the KRWD's comment. Imagine if all your music was identical to the master tape with no middle variable. Yeah, I mean, that's the goal. You're trying to get as close to that as possible. You might argue that like a really well-made tape copy, I mean, that's pretty close. If you've got, if you've run that tape copy on tip-top equipment and you recorded it really well and all that, that's pretty close. But still, it's not the same. Going through the cutter head, now the acetate that you get, because I usually get an acetate to check, and then Bernie does it again and does one for the plant once I approve it to the exact same specs. And that's the one that gets plated. The one that gets plated and that turns into your record, it never gets played, because every time you play an acetate, you leave a mark, so you lose some fidelity. But I still want to check it. So he does one for me, I check it, and then he does another one that goes to the plant. So that acetate, that can sound pretty spectacular too. And almost no one gets to hear that because, unless you're involved in making vinyl yourself, you don't usually get a chance to hear that. But those sound pretty stunning. Although it is also a little different because the lacquer material is a little softer.
yeah.
So it's not the same as the PVC or like the plastic that the records are actually made out of. So everything is a little different. Everything makes a difference. And yeah, that's the goal. Like you really try to get as close to the master tape as you can. And that's why people like Bernie, Doug Sachs, Kevin Gray, Ryan K. Smith, like that's why they have all that fancy equipment. So they can affect sound if they want to and if they need to, but they can also be as transparent as they possibly can if they don't need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where the real art is to be able to create that balance so the outcome gets you as close to the original as possible. That's
Certainly.
the goal. That's always the goal.
Absolutely. And I think I'm hoping this can be a viable blueprint to create new music. So, I mean, this started because I was trying to put out my own music, and I'm still going to do that. But I'm talking to other artists and musicians right now, and right now, mostly in the jazz realm. But I'm also, uh, envisioning trying to do things in different genres eventually. And it's probably going to be a slow build. I mean, I would be happy if we could put out 2 or 3 records next year and 2 or 3 records the year after that, and then build from there. And for that, the records have to sell enough because I don't have independent financing to make this all work. I have some support from, actually, I should mention this. I have some support from a couple of audio companies. They're big Swiss, very high-end companies. One is called Dartzeal, and the other one is called Stenheim. Dartzeal makes very fancy, expensive amps, and Stenheim makes very fancy speakers. And so they helped me a little bit on the last record, Vintage, and on the next record, Heart. And I'm really grateful for that because I think it's nice that very high-end equipment makers also care and put some money into developing artists and trying to help musicians actually put out high-quality vinyl. So they're helping a little bit, but I don't know if they're going to keep doing that. So mainly we rely on the end user, the listeners, to buy the records. And if enough people do, then we can do more things. And that's what I'm hoping is going to happen.
Great. Yeah, and I encourage everybody to go to your website and to look at what you have and to to support this product and this ingenuity that you're putting into it, because it's good to see younger folks doing that, keeping things alive, because there was a time when this was all fading off into one direction, it seemed like.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I mean, it sounds better. It feels better. I think it's also a better experience as a listener. Like the act of putting a reel on your reel to reel machine or queue up a record, that's like uh that's a different listening experience because you're sitting down, you're gonna take the tone arm, you're gonna put the needle on, you're not gonna be able to press something to go to the next track that quickly. You're gonna have to get up from your couch to do it. So it's like, I think it's more conducive to listening. And I think it's a better experience for everyone. It's a better experience for us musicians playing together in a room and trying to make something that sounds like we sound live.
Mhm.
And I think it's a better experience. As a jazz player, the economics of making jazz records are so bad right now that like you can't make any money through streaming really. And
Oh
so
yeah,
if you want to
no.
finance a record, like people buying vinyl is actually a viable way to finance the record. And if I did those records in digital, first they wouldn't sound as good, but also I'd definitely be losing a lot of money and I would have to stop doing it because there's not enough money in streaming. Even if you make the best sounding record you're capable of in digital, there's you can't make it work financially, at least not in a niche market such as jazz. John Loper says, do you
Yeah.
have a fun page on the website? I don't have a fun page per se. Like I used to run Kickstarters for the records, but since I created Analog Tone Factory, I decided to not do that and just have pre-orders up. So if you go to the website and you click on either reel to reel or vinyl or CDs, then you get the albums that are up. There's three of them. Two of them are selling, Vintage and No Filter. And the third one, Heart, which is this one, it's coming up. It'll be, I actually have the vinyl already, which is why I was able to show it on screen. But the official release date is August 30th. So if you want to pre-order it, you can. I'll ship what I have. No Filter is actually sold out, I believe. Vintage is not. That's still available, and I can ship it right now. And Heart, I have them already. They're actually a little cheaper right now. They're like, if you get the basic vinyl, they're like $35 instead of 40. They'll go up to 40 once the record is out, and that's how we're gonna do it so far. Uh, so that's how you can support us.
Yeah, so I'd say, even if it isn't your kind of music, buy a record, give it to a gift as a friend for Christmas or whatever that likes jazz. Support. You can show support in so many ways. And another interesting thing I put on the banner here is he's actually doing the streaming after the physical releases. So he's giving priority to the physical releases, which I really think is a cool idea. And I really give you a lot of credit for thinking of that.
Thank you. I mean, I hope that because there's a little bit of interest in those on the physical side, I'm hoping that we can generate some interest in the digital side too. But yeah, it's not easy to pull this off. So I love jazz, but never heard of artists. Okay,
There you
so I
go.
have a bunch of stuff on YouTube. You can actually check out a lot of what I do. So I'm gonna put a bunch of links in the chat. Uh, Now, some of those are uh, like live things, so they're not those records. But I'm gonna put three live tracks that I recorded in New York at a place called Bar Bayeux, where I actually run a little jazz series there. So those are just like live gigs, but I'll give you an idea of what we sound like live. And that's the same band that's on Heart. So myself, Jerome Sabbagh, Joe Martin on upright bass, and the great Al Foster on drums. Then there's a teaser for Heart. Then there's a video of Al Foster warming up. And then there are two tracks. And then there's a track called Prelude to a Kiss, which is a ballad. And that's on there. So that's going to give you an idea, I think. So yeah, all these things just appeared in the chat. I'm hoping, yeah, you might have to cut and paste the URL, but there's a bunch of stuff there. It should work, I think.
I'm going to try to play one of these.
Yeah, see if you can pull it off.
Yeah, right. I'm going to try here. Give me just a second. You guys in the chat there, tell me if you can hear this coming through. I'm going to mute myself and then try to play it, see if it plays. This is the title track from Heart. Can't hear it?
I can't.
Okay.
Yeah, but also, you know what? Like, if anybody here is interested and they want to hear a couple of tracks, I'll send them to you because I want to kind of generate interest in this. So I'll send you a couple of tracks digital and you can check it out. And if you like it, then, you know, you can support. I totally get people wanting to hear the music. So I'm going to put in my email in the chat. And anyone who wants to hear some stuff, I'll send you a couple of tracks, 192.24 for free, and you can check it out. So here it is. I'm going to put, yeah, this is right. So yeah, my email should be in there now. Oh, failed to post. Okay, you know what? It seems I can't post my email. So it's just, if you go to the website, there's like, you can easily contact me. It's info@analogtonefactory.com. info@analogtonefactory.com. If you go to the website, there's a contact on there. Anybody who contacts me through this, I'll send you some stuff if you want to hear it.
Yeah, just note that you heard it here on the show, and you'll know that, you know, that's so info@analogtonefactory.com.
Yep.
That's good.
Yeah, you know what? I should probably turn the light on because I'm noticing
You're fading away.
darker and darker. Hang on a second.
We're having an eclipse in New York.
All right, this is a little better. Sorry, guys, I wasn't really noticing that.
I thought it was a camera thing at first.
Sorry. All right, love the piano less trio format. I bet it'll sound great, especially with a yeah. I gotta say, this record in particular, Heart, I think it sounds pretty spectacular. I think it might be the best sounding thing I've ever done. So yeah, and it really does. The digital sounds good, but the AAA vinyl sounds much better. Thank you, John. Just bought one. Appreciate that.
Appreciate it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, very good. Well, that's the best way to support these artists, I think, especially you know, here with the investment in the technology and the analog approach. You know, even music, you know, for me, honestly, that maybe isn't exactly my top genre, to listen to a good recording, I can respect that so much. So it really, to me, is a way to, because you're really investing in the format, you know, the methodology to get there.
And, and to be honest, like, I really do want to expand this beyond jazz. So it's probably going to take another year at least, maybe two, but I'm hoping, we very much envision this to not just be a jazz label. Like, I'm a jazz musician, but as I said, I listen to all sorts of stuff. I would like to do other things. So that's part of that's definitely something we're going to be working on. And, you know, hopefully 2 years from now, we'll have something to show for it.
Yeah. No, that's good. I wish you well on that for sure. You know, one of the things that I know it's all time, but I was listening to what you said about when you get a test pressing back and listening and marking, and, you know, think of the time that, you know, it takes really, there's so many stages, and that's just another piece of the time stage that it takes to get it done well.
Yeah.
We think a lot of artists, honestly, they don't really listen to the test pressings much. Maybe the label does or something, but we tend to get that feeling, honestly.
Yeah, I think if someone has got to do it, like I do it because it's my music and it's my label, and I'm really picky about stuff like that. So I want also, I've got an audience of people such as yourself and like the people that are in the chat here. Obviously, everybody here has got pretty high standards and pretty high expectations. So I want to try to meet those expectations as best I can. I want to put out the best thing I can. So I'm trying to be as careful as I can. Someone has got to do that, and if that's not the artist, then it's got to be someone in the label, in the production company, and maybe some hired hand to do quality control. And it's true that, I don't think everybody does it, especially sometimes the big artists. I don't
Mhm.
necessarily think somebody actually really takes the time to sit down and do it properly, and it makes a huge difference. Like, you really have to. You can't just like not pay attention, put the needle on, and like, oh, this sounds good, and like, you're gonna get bad results if you do that. Like, you really have to, like, tape and vinyl, those are not forgiving things on the technical, from a technical standpoint. It really has to be right. Otherwise, it can really not be on the level you want it to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and it does take that investment of time from people in the mastering chain
Yep.
to get that
Yep.
right,
Yep.
um, and down to, like you said, down to the tape, down to the ability to be able to make a criteria evaluation of different test pressings to see if there's redundancy and
Hmm.
errors, because there's not. Once it's out there, it's out there, and
Yep.
that's you're right, and I think you're a lot like me. You don't want to have your name on it if it isn't what you really intended at all.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, you gotta at least do the best you can. And it's happened to me on a couple of occasions, that I had to get several test pressings before there was one that was good enough for me to approve. It's also happened not on one of my records, but on somebody else's record that I was working on. Um, that like we got a test pressing that was fine, and then we got the final run from the plant, and it wasn't one of the plants that I mentioned, to be clear, but the final run wasn't as good as the test pressing. And so I took some videos, and I explained the issue, and credit to the plant, like they actually redid the whole run. But obviously it's not something that you want to have happen if you can
sure.
avoid it. But sometimes you gotta but you gotta draw the line somewhere, because yeah, if you press 500 or 1,000 and they're out there and you got people buying them and it's not an insignificant amount of money, you know it's got to be good.
Yeah, and it's like Chad's doing a lot of reissues. Obviously, that's what they do.
Yep.
But some of the one of the first things I do when the UHQRs come out, like the Steely Dan's, is I look in the dead wax to
Hmm.
see the revision number that Bernie's put in.
Hmm.
Like one of them was RE6, which meant that was the seventh cut
Yep.
that he had done.
Yep.
Chad's a tough customer from a listening standpoint.
Yeah, and also, I mean, those records are like $125 or something. So it's
150.
like, oh,
Yeah,
really? Okay. I don't have any, I'm gonna be honest, but yeah, I mean, it's a lot of money. So
it
yeah,
is.
you pretty much need to be flawless at that level.
Yeah, no,
Honestly, a
exactly.
$40 record should be flawless too, but flawless is hard. I mean, like a perfectly pressed record is with like nothing on side A, nothing on side B, everything centered, everything flat, no background noise. I mean, that's hard to achieve. But if you get close to that, then you're in the zone, I think. You know.
Yeah, yeah, and it's good that we have people shooting for that. That's the thing. We have the people in the industry that are after that still.
Yeah.
Um, this is quite resurrection story. I mean, the last time it happened 2,000 years ago, it was a big story too. But this one with vinyl, it's kind of, stepping back and looking at it when you think about it. I cannot tell you how many people I know who were friends who in the 80s and 90s got rid of their records.
Mm.
And like I did not, much to the chagrin of my wife, I might add. But and somebody asked earlier, why are my shelves empty? Well, it's because I just moved, which maybe you didn't hear at the beginning. So they're in boxes, and now the fun begins, and that is going through them to put them back and maybe reorganize. So maybe I'll be selling a few of my duplicates, because God knows I have some. Right? New AAA Sabbath, good too. You're talking to John. Are you talking about the Rhino reissue of their first album that sold out in a week, less than a week, 5,000 copies? Yeah. Chad does offer 15 IPS direct. Yeah.
One thing I'm going to mention about our reel-to-reel is, and this is something that's pretty rare, every reel-to-reel we sell is made directly from the master. So usually what people sell is a copy of a copy, or even a copy of a copy of a copy. So in our case, because I have the masters and I get to decide how to use them, like we run several copies at the same time, but we're running them off the actual tape, in the case of Heart, that the music was recorded on. So you're getting a one generation away copy, which is really rare to get.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I'm glad you pointed that out, because you're right. You do usually get a copy of a copy.
Yep.
So that's, but again, that's rarefied air in terms of people that have the equipment and are into that. But just the fact that they're available, is, man.
And it helps. I mean, it's nice to see that people are into that. Like, I mean, I use this professionally. I don't actually have that at home. Like, those tapes are really expensive. My tapes are really expensive. Other people's tapes are really expensive. So I don't actually have this at home, but I know how good it is from the studio, and we make them as best as we can. So as a mass market thing, vinyl is a better proposition. But yeah, like the people that are into tape and buying those tape like that, really, even if there are like 20 of them or 30 of them, like that really helps us. It's a big it's still, every little bit helps.
Yeah. No, and for your endeavor, I'll call it, it's that investment in the artistry and the technology. I mean, rebuilding that equipment, I mean, that's an act of passion, obviously.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. I mean, my partner Pete Rendy, who's a great pianist and engineer, he did some of that work. And then there's a couple of individuals, Dave Denton-Fass in Seattle, who's an Ampex specialist. He reworked the transport for us. And the transport is really important because the tape has got to move right for things to sound good.
Oh, yeah.
We got new heads from Flux Magnetics. John French at JRF hooked us up. And we also got John Chester, who is a great electronics tape guy, to figure out how to implement the 30 IPS AES EQ on that machine. So we couldn't have done it without those people. And that was a lot of work, even for people who are as high level as these people are.
Yeah, and I mean, those people are few and far between, and as time goes on, it's tougher.
That's also true.
Yeah, but for them, at the same time, to get that chance to work on something like that, on the flip side, I mean, I've got a quad receiver a guy's been working on, and he's just loving the challenge of learning new things that he hadn't encountered before. So, it's interesting.
Oh, I'm seeing a question. Yeah. What does your interconnection means from your master tape original to your duplicating master tape machines, please? Okay. So I'm working with Jason Smith of Gray Matter Audio, who's been making tapes for a long time. And we went into a partnership to do this. So he's using a Sony APR 5002 as the playback machine, but he's not using the Sony electronics. He's using a Nick Doshi tube preamp, which is a pretty fancy audiophile tape preamp that is a modern tube tape preamp. And I believe it's the Doshi tape line stage. I think it's the V3. And so those are the electronics that the signal goes through to go to the other machines. And the record machines are he's got different ones, but they're mostly Otari's 5050 is what those are. And he's got a whole bunch. I forget exactly what he's using in terms of cabling and power cables and all that, but he's got all that to a place that he really likes. And I haven't been to where he does the dubs, but like I've checked out the dubs, and I think they sound really good. We also put a lot of effort into trying to do it different ways. So we did it with the Sony electronics. We did with another tape machine. We tried different tape stocks on the record side. We tried different machines. We made sure the phase was correct. So absolute polarity. So a lot of research and effort went into getting to the point where we are now with making tape dubs, and I think they sound quite good. And we're still working on finding ways to make them better, but we're pretty happy with where they are now. Those guys at JRF are not allowed to retire. Yeah, I agree. So apparently, Greg Orton, who makes the heads at Flux Magnetics, I'm hearing that he is training people, and I'm hoping that that's true, because we definitely need a source for good playback and record and erase heads. Otari 5050, a workhorse of machine, yeah. I mean, all those machines are not made anymore. What's interesting is there are a few playback machines that are being made. There's a French company called, I think it's Analog Audio Devices. I've actually met the guy in France. His name is Christophe Martinez. The machine sounds really good. I think it's called the TP1000. There's also Metaxas making new machines, playback. And there's like a couple of other companies. I forgot what they are, and those machines are expensive. Like they're like aimed at the high-end audiophile market, but at least they're making them.
Sure.
And
Right.
I know that Analog Audio Devices, the French manufacturer, I know he's working on a record version too. So I don't know when that's going to come, but hopefully that would be exciting to get a new machine with record capabilities. Although, a lot of the Studers are still around. And some people have, like, if you go to quarter-inch machines, there are a lot more options. You could use an Ampex, such as the one I have. Like, they're more common in quarter-inch. There's also great solid-state Ampex machines. Like a 440 is a good sounding machine. Like, there's all sorts of tape machines from the 70s and 80s that sound really good, but the key is to getting them maintained really well.
Sure. Absolutely. I left this comment up because David Cross was thinking what I was thinking, and that your comprehensive answer and an artist knowing that much technically is really refreshing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And a lot of times we can speak with maybe people on the technical end, but they're, not the artist. And I think that's really impressive on your part. So I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
The Studers are so warm sounding, they melt ice.
Yeah, wait until you hear the Ampex we got. But yeah, Studers are really nice, but it's a different. I mean, everything has a sound, so it's a great sound. I prefer the Ampex tube sound, but Studers are great machines, and the transports are works of art for sure.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Music Sanctuary Tim, for joining too. But I know I've kept you an hour. I really want to appreciate, but I do want to wrap up and
Okay.
remind people this is your website.
Yep.
Analog Tone Factory.
Analogtonefactory.com. Yep. You can.
Please go there, check it out, order something. Like I said, it's to help a great cause here. And again, his release Heart will be coming out physically August 30th, and then the streaming on October 11th. And if you want a sample of his music from that, please send him an email at info@analogtonefactory.com requesting it. And of course, if you lose that or forget it, you can always email me and I will forward it and try to make sure you guys stay in the loop. But Jerome, really, really interesting. I mean, gosh, I didn't know what to expect today, but I knew just by what you had done on your website, you were heading in the right direction. And I really look forward to your record coming out and what you have to do in the future. Please keep us in mind to let us know what's going on. And
Absolutely.
when I'm in your part of the world, I'd love to meet up sometime.
I'd love to. Thanks for your support, David. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. I really appreciate it. One thing you can do to support too is also follow us on the socials. We're on YouTube, Analog Tone Factory, Instagram, Facebook. All these things help, and we're easily findable at Analog Tone Factory on all these things: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. And thanks, David. I mean, really appreciate your support, and it's nice to meet everybody here, and I will definitely keep you informed.
Yeah, and for those who might just be listening and not watching, the analog does not have UE. It's ANALOG TONE factory.com. Just to be clear, because it can be spelled different ways.
Yep.
Great. Well, thanks again, Jerome, and everybody else. Thank you for being here with us. And for those who are going to listen to this later, I hope you find this interesting. You all have a great week. Thank you, Jerome, and we'll catch you soon.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome. 1 second.